I'm posting this on your posting of my brother's revenge wedding party and my treacherous parents. I married yesterday. Not even one family member attended the occasion. First of all, I never invited my brother Gerald. To say the least, my brother and I are not talking to each other. That could be an imagination, but what shocked me was that my parents did not come for my big day. For a revengeful Gerald was determined in his heart. Therefore, to have the greatest birthday party after 28 days, on my wedding eve, for malice and spite for not inviting me to my marriage, he forwarded invitations for my whole family for 1 week on my wedding eve. No light gathering. For this he undertook no lack of effort, renting a cavernous hall for the occasion with a live band and a stand-up comedian. He arranged elaborate drinking bouts and service alcohol. The artists were certainly nothing like stars, but had, at least on a local basis, to command a reasonable amount of popularity. To quote exactly what I was told, such a gathering did not come at a light expense. A day passed, and my cousin showed me the invitation. I thought that people would come to his party and not attend my wedding. However, my wife and I never intended to interfere with the decisions that our guests have made. We thought that our guests had all the rights to choose their own way. Since we were getting married 8 hours from a hotel and party was in town, then all who would have made effort to get to his party wouldn't have been able to make it for our wedding the following day. Lucky for us, each of them did not come for the party but came to the wedding instead, so looking back now my worry did not apply after all. One must consider, a day like that of marriage is rather one not to miss rather than celebrating a birthday. My parents did not attend. I did not expect it, though we fought 3 days prior to the marriage. At least I could take them to the party of my brother, instead of missing my marriage. The argument was the 4th day ahead of the day of the wedding. After the argument, with all the arrangements being finalized, in some way I never managed to call them. But then they didn't even call me. And surprisingly, I thought they would have never missed the wedding. Matter of fact, it so happened that the discussion over a phone argument regarding the issue of Gerald's birthday party is how my cousin told me about the invitation and called my parents to the line thinking they will back me up, and we were just talking with Gerald on it and called off his party later. Then they started accusing me that I never invited him for my marriage and told him that I have not even ended the war that we had in the past, that he deserves to be petty as we were adults not kids and, therefore, could do nothing. I was so sad that they were supporting him and that they were defending cruelty regarding Gerald. Therefore, I went closer to them. We had an argument that lasted only for a little time, and after this, I had to get off by telling them that if they believed him, then they must come to his party rather than my party since it was the last conversation before my marriage day. It was my wedding day the following day, and I dialed up to call my parents. We had sent a car to pick them up to travel with us. The car came back vacant. According to the driver, he rang their doorbell and called them severally without someone answering the door. So it was for the whole day. They would not pick anything I called them for. Even on the following morning when the ceremony was to be performed, I expected them to arrive. They didn't. I had to get married without them. That night was too merry for me to have been the groom of my soulmate, so nothing could prevent me from this new life. I, however, did not go and see them again that night of my wedding. They missed one of the most unforgettable nights in my life. It wasn't until late that night, when the reception was going full blast, that my parents called. Of course, I answered, as that is what I always do. First they explained that they hadn't appeared for my wedding because you had instructed them not to come. Then they wished me luck getting married and getting my way. None of our relatives came to Gerald's party, either. My parents were mad at me. They kept repeating I somehow alienated everybody for him. His party was a disaster, his family members completely ignoring the whole affair, his friends and co-workers coming, Gerald expecting a great turnout which never materialized beyond a few people. He spent a fortune on that event, and now he was mad not only at the family, but at me also. My parents straight away blamed me. They thought it was all because of me making those calls, calling people and persuading them from going to such a party. Instead, everyone should go out and attend such a wedding to any rational creature. I went out into the reception room to speak to them. Told them it was upsets that they came all the way for my wedding for such an insignificant reason, for skipping my own wedding. I told him all that he'd done for me, and not only were there no tears when they had everything they could desire for this farce, they were actually mocking me over it, laughing like they do the rest of my family when things go according to their expectations. As I was bitter against my parents, I just let it all come out about them. They cared one whit about anything I said to them because they believed I was jealous of my brother due to my insecurity nature. I finally got all that. I put the phone on hold and blocked their number. I told myself never to allow the influence of my parents to mar this fine day. That was 3 days since my marriage and finally thought it is time to let them know what had happened. All my family members were in a similar confusion, how my parents skipped my wedding. In no way could they believe that their own children's most important day could be outcompete by Gerald's party. I therefore emailed all our relations with the entire situation surrounding my brother's party and why he had been invited, the argument I had with my parents, and how they twisted my words to ensure they never came for my wedding. To put salt to the wound, I included a hot over-the-phone conversation we had in my reception. I left no stone unturned. Now all have turned against them and start blaming me once again. All that they consider is that because I made some drama of them and tried to defame them, their story might be valid. However, that is not the issue here. Whatever is the reason or whatever is it, the reality remains as told to them the reason why they did not appear at my marriage. That's not my headache. All of this is rest of the family's headache. Many people ask me why Gerald and I have such an awful relationship. The truth is that I never really believed that it is by one incident or reason. That is just how it has always been, starting since we were kids. We never really had time for one another, and the more time we spent together as we age, the far apart we drifted. He was a little jealous of me, and he would follow all the things that I do. That did not go well with me. That caused many arguments, and we totally hated each other by the time we got into high school. Years passed by, and I went away to college. I stayed there in that same city working. Every time that I came home, he was nasty. He would say terrible things about my appearance, my job, and anything else just to get inside my skin. This first really annoyed me, then struck me that I am not going to struggle for this. So I just stopped paying him much heed. It's one of those relationships that, with the passage of time, when he saw I stopped reacting, then lost interest altogether, and would just play the pretend the other guy's dead game at family gatherings, I don't think there is any one argument or incident which caused it but years and years of being constantly negative and petty, churning up that distance. That's why I didn't invite him to my wedding, and I don't think I have done anything bad. I also don't know if he would even want to be invited. And if he would, then he wasn't very good at reacting. My parents knew all about the fact that we were no longer on speaking terms. They attempted to mend the thing between him and me. When they discovered this was impossible, they left. Never in history did they side more strongly with him than they did me, nor vice versa. I found myself in shocked awe of how, with zero reflection, they switched allegiances. Thanks to all who supported me. I feel just great that I was correct, and that I owe no apologies to them. Since that email is sent, never have I seen a message sent by my parents. Of course, I purged all of these. Otherwise, I have blocked them from any platform which they can avail of their own, because they are already in bulk accounts. They will be successful in getting access to me anyhow. I'm not going to take this back. I'm telling the truth, and if it hurts a few of them that much, so be it. Anyway, it was their personal freedom for their choice, and if they want to cut me off from them, that is their problem, not mine. If on the wedding day it had already been decided that Gerald was the one responsible for turning the family against me, then it seemed that I never did that until now. If they were going to blame me anyway, then it might as well be the truth comes out of the door. What I did was far less manipulative than what they are doing now. An email came from my cousins and the rest of my cousins to me, which my parents sent to them. They claim that I have always been jealous and insecure about Gerald. The only thing they will admit is the fact that he threw a last-minute birthday party, but continues saying it's because I humiliated him. Apparently, they even spun a story that only weeks after sending out the wedding invitations I called Gerald just to needle him. Apparently, I laughed at him because he wasn't on the list. He wasn't good enough. They even had the temerity to include another patently absurd lie that I told Gerald that my in-laws, belonging to a moneyed family, should not be told about him because he's a lazy freelancer. Course, all this never happened. And anybody who knows me well will not believe them. The rest of the family does not take their lies for granted, so I haven't commented on it either. At that point, I am fine. If they can alter history to try to make themselves sound better, well and good. I waste not another minute on that. I know they lie. Nobody believes them. But if you really think about it, it almost becomes funny that they have to work so hard just to come up with stories in their effort to make me the bad guy, rather than help their image. That somehow makes it worse. I don't understand why they're so determined to turn me into the villain, especially when I've done nothing to harm them, aside from one email. It makes no sense. But one thing is clear. They're desperate and grasping at straws. That is the end of the chapter for me. Newlyweds don't have that much time, because such a moment will never be again. The drama can hurt them afterwards. However, I am seriously of the opinion that that should not be how their drama ends, as that drama can still be stretched so long as it could. Update number 2. Conference call with Gerald and my parents. It's already a week since I updated you. Last night, my dad and Gerald were calling me back using burners, so my phone showed up 2 strange numbers. I wasn't confused to know who that was, however. I was home with my wife, and I wanted to answer, that is, to disturb them. When they called to yell at me, yet had to make sure that I could hear them, which is really funny, I pretended not to be able to hear them for 5 minutes after I answered. After all, they finally reached the subject course. The rest of the family was not amiable to them. All were vexed with their behavior and viewed them really petty. Suddenly now, they had to put it right. I knew not what they wanted from me. I asked, albeit in a manner whereby I never actually had any desire to agree, but just out of curiosity, but to see just how far they would go with this. Of course, they took me serious. They said that too much has been said, and at the end of it all, it is the reputation of our family that hurts. I was shocked because all along, up to now, how far my reputation could go, but everything was fine. People were liking me. It sounded like they're trying to get me to believe that somehow it has to do with me, perhaps that would get me to roll over a little more. Their response was an apologetic email telling us that we had worked through all the issues with each other, forgiven one another because we were family after all. This was how their thinking had it. Our reputation could ride this one by just playing dumb and pretending as if all is just fine and dandy. They wouldn't want to be any laughingstock, nor become the cause for gossip circulating about. But I saw through them. They wanted no peace. They only realized that nobody was buying into their lies against me. Now, therefore, if they ever hoped to get out of that family's disfavor, they must pretend that all was well. That was the game, and that was when I was out of it. Not my reputation, but theirs was on the line here. I wasn't needed to be feigning forgiveness over them. I also had an issue with the presentation, as if we had forgiven each other. The position they were not in was to forgive me because I never did anything wrong to them. Sure, perhaps I have lost my temper, but they opt to miss my wedding to attend one birthday party. Whatever happened after that was left for them. And after all the lies they had said, I hadn't pretended that was all right. I hadn't pretended to forgive over them saving face. Well, I made that quite clear. Whether they wanted to remain rightfully indignant and continue to cast false aspersions in the hope that someone would believe them was up to them. It infuriated them. Gerald was most angry. He said that it was my fault. If I had invited him, this would not have happened. For a second, horrible is what I felt. But I remembered it was my wedding day. I did not have to invite him, especially when we were hostile and barely on speaking terms. The whole conversation became just like a verbal battle. His parents yell out their mind at him over some other thing that they wouldn't stop at, and the yelling of something to me is interrupted by that. I hanged and blocked both their numbers through burners. No regrets there. That's very interesting at first, but honestly wears me out when they try to call me back again, playing along with them at this game of theirs. Won't take a call from them. I'm sometimes feeling bad playing along sometimes. At first, messing with them became funny. The second thoughts afterward came. When I am around, then messing around with them turns out quite tiring to my part, so I may even not try and answer as the case becomes in case I want to deal again with those who try reaching back. It is almost a couple of days when my last updating time has happened. It rang and rang this morning at about 4 a.m. Some number I did not know, so I let it go. I knew it was Gerald or my parents calling, and there was no way in heck that I was going to be dealing with that at 4 a.m. especially, since I had to get up and go to work a few hours later. But after some time, about 30 minutes later, we could hear shouting outside our house. The doorbell would not stop ringing, and some fellow was pounding at the door. For a moment, we could not understand what was happening. However, I soon identified the voices. It was my parents and Gerald. They would bang on the door, yelling at me to get up and open the door, and make all these claims that they had to see us because my life was destroying theirs. They have forsaken the rest of the family, and it is all my fault. If this happened during the day, when the sun shines, I would be angry. But at 4 a.m., I was angry. That wasn't all. It was blatant harassment, but it was loud enough that I knew for sure that the neighbors could hear everything. God bless them that nobody ever brought it up afterwards, which I was glad for, but I knew that they had to have been as shocked as we were. It was embarrassing. I didn't bat my eyelashes even once. I called the cops right away. She locked the door to the bedroom and continued yelling, screaming and crying until she brought the cops over. She and I both were so hot and tired that I did not even get off my bed and went back into it when eventually the police did knock on the door. We had explained all this above at the time, and our parents and Gerald were thrown out of our land. By then, we had lost too many nights' sleep to be able to carry on working. It was maddening to the extreme that this stupidity of theirs was able to fill an entire working day. Why they are so offended at being cut off at this hour, I don't know, but at least we finally know one thing: we have had enough. If this pushes through, we're definitely filing for a restraining order. We cannot change our numbers or transfer houses because that would be pretty expensive and tedious and something that we can't do now. But this is the least we could do. We have grounds, of course. They never really threatened us. But we're consulting with a lawyer to see what we could do. That's a week or so ago. The next day we had a lawyer on our property. Mom and Dad plus Gerald were a ruckus, no damage/harm to the property, but were disorderly conduct. No crime has been reported. Thank the Lord they get to keep driving off into their sunset, and a restraining order would be an adequate remedy. Therefore, that's what we're pursuing. Today we got the formal notice, and within a few days, we would be in court and getting everything done. And then after that, this nightmare would be over. I have discussed the matter with my family members about what's happening. I never thought anyone could be less surprised than me. Actually, I do not think anyone is less surprised than me because of hiding it. It's just weird how my parents, Gerald, never really hung out with the rest of the family to begin with. My parents always kept to themselves, and Gerald never really said much to anyone. So why is this a big issue now? I don't think it has anything to do with the family, actually. I think it's just so that they could make me have problems. Well, if that was it, then they did them so wrong, for they did, in fact, harm themselves worse by doing so, since now they will have to watch for its consequence. How pitiful it is, since all that would not happen if only they were any of the other ordinary people other than this one, but they opted for shame, and that just brought to me the same feeling of them too with them as well. I am not ready for the restraining order against my family members. Now, of course it is too late for me not to. 2 months are already over. Just last week was our passage 2 years running with the restraining order against my parents and Gerald. Or so, its enforcement date for about last week or so. It feels very relieving. The rest of the family has been with us since the very beginning. Now that they have cut my parents and Gerald off, now they are inquiring about my well-being every other day. I am fine almost, but it is terrible the way things happen in my family. I do have relatives, actually. Some of my cousins meant everything. I have always believed that they could be my support system. At this point, I even call an excellent lawyer for me. I am quite grateful to them all. At this point, though, it is time to let go and flip the page over. After some few days, I and my wife are going on honeymoon, so knowing that it is, in fact, what we need change of place, I already look forward to leaving for my break. During those days, I shall be deciding whether to leave everything about my parents and Gerald, whom I was just seeing them for trying to ruin my wedding. For sure, I won't let them ruin this also. Thanks to all of you who have followed my story and supported me. That really means a lot. To a new beginning.